to our podcast, and this podcast is in connection with a book called The Handbook of Using Virtual Exchange Across Disciplines, Building Global Citizens from Home. And we are part of the public health section of this textbook. The book is due to be published in the print version. We're hoping it will come out in April 2026. However, the articles will be published prior to that as individual standalone articles and accompanied with podcasts. So welcome everybody to our podcast this afternoon. And I'd just like to welcome the authors of this, this chapter, Henrico Haystack, Yolandi Heymans, Christian Brink, David Lewis, and Alexandra Holmes, who will introduce themselves just now. I'm Dr. Penny Orton. I work in the Faculty of Health Sciences at the Durban University of Technology as an honorary research fellow. The title of the chapter is Advancing Sustainable Development in Healthcare Education Through Virtual Exchange. And I'd like to now welcome the authors to introduce themselves. Thank you. Henrico, if you'd like to start.
Thanks, Penny. I'm Enrico Haystack. I am a pharmacist and I work for the University of the Northeast. I'm Enrico Haystack. I'm a pharmacist at the Northwest University. I'm attached to pharmacy practice, currently lecturing a bit of students, and then also busy with my PhD thesis, which focuses on virtual exchange, work integrated learning, and how that aids to education.
Okay, good. Oh, sorry, Penny. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Yolandi Heymans, Professor Yolandi Heymans. I work in the Center for Health Professions Education, and my research focuses on health professions education specifically to enhance learning and student engagement. Thank you. I'm going to hand over to Christian, if you can introduce yourself.
Thank you very much, Yolandi. So I am Professor Christian Brink, or most people just call me Tian, and I'm a full professor of pharmacology. I'm also the BPharm program leader at the School of Pharmacy, Northwest University in South Africa. My academic work focuses on pharmacology education and also international collaboration in health professions education. And that includes innovative learning approaches such as virtual exchange that we are talking about today. And then besides my scholarly interest in pharmacology education, my research interests include preclinical studies of novel antidepressant therapies, as well as animal research ethics. Dave, over to you.
So my name is Dave Lewis. I'm a pharmacologist, but also a professor of education for professional and sustainable development in the School of Biomedical Sciences, University of Leeds in the UK. I'm student education focused, so my interests are in preparing learners for the workplace and their future careers, so professional development, lifelong learning. And my other interests are in the professional development of all those involved in the care and use of animals for research and education. Capstone projects as an addition to traditional research projects for undergraduate students, and research ethics. Alex.
Yeah, I'm Dr. Alex Holmes, and I'm a lecturer in pharmacology at the University of Leeds. So I'm the program manager for pharmacology here, involving quite a lot of the curriculum design. Then also I run our transferable skills modules, so 2 team-based modules where our students work on projects related to sustainable development goals and come up with solutions related to these. In the second year in particular, we're looking at that global element to these challenges and projects, which is where this feeds in with the virtual exchange.
Thank you. Tian and Dave, perhaps you would like to share with us how you met and got started, and how the project developed out of your relationship. Thank you.
So,
thank you very much, Penny. Dave, you please go ahead. Yes.
So I first met Tian 15 years ago at the World Congress of Pharmacology. It was being held in South Africa. When Tian was the chair of the education section, and I was delivering courses in research animal sciences there as part of the international network. Since then, Tian and I have maintained our collaborations, and I've been to Northwest University a number of times to support them in developing research ethics.
Yeah, that's actually correct. And I also recall that at that time, we were preparing for the World Congress of Pharmacology, and Professor Douglas Oliver and I started the Pharmacology for Africa initiative. And that's also something that overlaps with a lot with what Dave has been doing, since Dave has been involved a lot with developing countries and giving education and training on the use of animals and other topics in pharmacology. And so that was very much aligned with what we were doing with the African initiative. And in that regard, we have worked together with some of these workshops, although they did a lot more than we did. So I think since that time, we've just kept our contact, and it's been a great journey since, for me, very enriching, as a matter of fact.
And for me as well. And building on that, in the School of Biomedical Sciences, students have 19 different choices of capstone projects, and one of them is to work with students in Nigeria in particular to address Sustainable Development Goal challenges. And that really led on to those links to develop Alex developing this partnership between Northwest University and University of Leeds.
Oh, yes, and maybe also importantly is a few years back, the pharmacology conference was in Glasgow. And so I was traveling to the UK, and I thought to pay a visit to the University of Leeds. And Dave invited me, and that is when we had a talk about our common interests. And Julandi also joined at that stage with on a virtual basis during the presentation. And I think that's where the whole initiative kicked off.
Thank you guys for that. Really a long partnership. And I often say that that's one of the difficulties with virtual exchange is actually the relationship. Once you have, got that relationship going, the rest kind of falls into place. So I think you really do have a very sustainable relationship. And so it's nice to see that it's, developed into virtual exchange. And I think you mentioned that Alex was sort of the instigator behind the virtual exchange, or getting the virtual exchange project going. So Alex, do you want to kick off with talking about your virtual exchange project?
Yeah, of course. I mean, I won't take all credit. I think Enrico did push and did a lot of the groundwork for a lot of this. And it was based on the collaboration between Dave, Tian, and Yolande. But essentially, in my modules, knowing that we were moving from students working on local challenges into working on these global challenges, there are a huge number of things that we wouldn't necessarily be able to teach them in the UK, things that might not be represented in the literature, and really that power of the lived experience of people working in healthcare and being able to talk about that. I started the second year module a couple of years ago, and initially started with a very small scale virtual exchange with South Africa, and then another one with a university in Japan. And then moving into the second year, really saw how powerful the collaboration with South Africa was. And so really focused on building up this in the year forward, kind of worked with Enrico to design how that might look, and also how we're going to articulate that to our students to make sure they're really seeing the benefits of it, preparing for it, and then being able to use it in their projects and kind of in their understanding of healthcare globally.
Alex, if I can jump in there and add the following. The virtual exchange project, I feel, opened up our students to a really great awareness of what's going on around the world in healthcare. They learned about the similarities, or not learned, they discussed the similarities and differences between our health system and the one in the UK. And one of the things that stood out is the students surprised that there is actually a lot of similarities, especially if you take a look at waiting times and service availability in both countries. Where South Africa currently is moving into a national health initiative, and the UK has got experience in it. I think the students, especially the South African students, got a lot of insight into that. And that's changed their way of thinking and doing and looking at healthcare on a global stage rather than just be focused on what's going on in their local context.
Yes, Enrico. Sorry, Alex, go first. That's fine.
Oh, I was just going to say that I completely and utterly agree. I think our students get so kind of hung up on what they see day to day in their own lives, but then getting to kind of really compare those things. And I think there were a lot of assumptions, particularly reading through some of the reflections from the students of kind of, actually, I hadn't realised that even though there is free healthcare and publicly available healthcare in the UK, that waiting lists are then an issue. And a lot of our students thinking, oh, well, public healthcare in South Africa, like that sounds like it's going to solve a lot of these issues, but then still finding that there were gaps there. I think that really kind of opened their eyes to these things. But I'll pass back to you, Lunde.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely true. I just want to touch on, you reiterated that. And I think if we look at the purpose of higher education specifically, we need to prepare our students for a globalized world. And that is then these young emerging healthcare professionals will be working with different disciplines and will be working in different countries, and they will be exposed to various to patients that are so diverse, and we all have these sustainable development goals across the globe. And I think healthcare is just one of them and the focus of this chapter. And it's so important that we provide opportunities for our students and expose them to different ways of knowing, being, and doing. And that is what makes this project so special. So I absolutely agree with you, Alex, in terms of what the difference that we saw in their reflections and being exposed to other ways of thinking and other ways of doing. So it was definitely very valuable.
What I could maybe also add is that from the South African perspective, we have for many years had students physically visit other universities across the globe, but it was limited to a very small number of students. I mean, the logistics are very difficult. The costs are high, and there are many other challenges associated with such an endeavor, and it's limiting. So we all know that post-COVID, or actually during COVID, there was a huge development, fast tracking of the development of technology. And I think the world actually opened up. I think these things were available beforehand, but I think the level of virtual interaction just improved to such an extent very recently that all of a sudden it became possible to now open such opportunities to basically a whole class of students, a whole cohort of students, and give them all this opportunity to benefit from this. And I think, Dave, you actually mentioned during my visit at Leeds that you used the word you would like to improve the employability of students, actually meaning their understanding of different contexts, to be able to function in various contexts. And this actually opens up my mind thinking, but this is exactly what we need also for our students in South Africa. So I think this gave us an ideal platform for actually achieving those objectives.
That for me is one of the biggest benefits, that increase in students' cultural awareness, cultural capital, cultural competencies as well, that awareness of the big wide world out there. And the other thing about a virtual exchange, again, you touched on there, Tian, is it's more inclusive. The cohort mix in the UK of students is changing. More are living at home, more have caring responsibilities, more mature students as well. And for that, a traditional placement or exchange visit is not, they can't do it. So by having these shorter opportunities that don't require travel or additional cost is far more inclusive and opens up the opportunities to a much more broader population of students.
Dave, if I can just add to your thought process. As Prof. Jan said earlier, the previous exposure was limited to students that can only visit other institutions physically. Virtual exchange gives the opportunity, as we've mentioned, for a lot of students to learn from other places in the world. And if we've got awareness, then small changes in the approach to healthcare will help that eventually we reach standard development goal ideals and hopefully get healthcare more equal on a global stage, rather than focused on rich countries where resource poor countries suffer a bit.
I think I'll add to that as well. I think also the benefit of it being a virtual exchange meant that we also got to be more aware of the conversations the students were having and get to also engage in that learning. Like, I think when you have that physical space with students in it, you can see the conversations happening, but you can't necessarily be a fly on the wall in the same ways or walk around and hear them in the same ways. Whereas this, we got to dip in and out of the breakout rooms, hear the conversations, also prompt conversation occasionally. And that was one of the things I left that meeting. I felt so excited about the things that I'd heard and the conversations I'd been part of. And I don't think that would have felt the same had it been a virtual exchange. I think they would have seen us coming and maybe changed conversations or stopped conversations. So I really enjoyed it for that element too.
Yes, and Alex, I want to add, in terms of how their disciplinary understanding evolved, that was also very important, and an important finding in this chapter as well, where they would have the opportunity to actually discuss, and the theory became live, and they had the opportunity to exchange examples, hear how everybody perceived this, and that is such a wonderful thing to allow students to actually apply what they've learned to a bigger scope and scale.
And I mean, the development goal that we're talking about, SDG 3.8.2, that is sort of centered to this whole chapter, relates to the access to quality, essential healthcare services. And I think it's not just the services, but also the education to be able to deliver those services. And this is actually also contributing in that regard. And a lot of the discussions were actually about the access and accessibility and obstacles in that regard with regards to health services in the two countries. And I think it brings the message home to, it's almost like this helicopter view where you are very much down to on earth with your own environment that you've known for many, many years. And then when you have this discussion with others in a different context, in a different country, it's almost like the helicopter lifting the student up, that they can actually look at not only what's happening in another country, but to have a re-look at what's happening in your own context, to sort of reflect on what it means, and sometimes even discuss some potential solutions. And these are the leaders of the future. So I think by exposing them early on, they may eventually be the ones who later on give solutions in their own context.
Thank you. Thank you, Christian. Just would anybody like to perhaps hazard a guess about what might have been missed in your courses if you hadn't engaged in a virtual exchange?
Penny, if I can maybe partially answer that question, I think my answer is going to open up another discussion. Is if there weren't virtual exchange, then the students firstly would not know that healthcare around the world suffers or faces the same challenges on a large scale. And secondly, the students would not be aware that having conversations about the field that you work in is actually fun. And the moment you can put fun back in learning, then you're inspiring people to to learn because it's fun to learn. Where coursework and the slog day to day through your work just to get your qualification or learn for a test, it's not necessarily as fun as discussing with peers from around the world.
I think adding to that it wasn't assessed, so there was no focus on marks, etc. There was no right or wrong answer. They were just open to engage and share thoughts.
I want to add, Penny, by saying I think if we didn't have this, I think the disciplinary depth, the coursework depth, would have been missed. The opportunity for students to engage with others, to really discuss this and to really unpack this and have a deeper understanding and construct your own understanding of what's happening globally. For me, that would have been missed.
And maybe I can also add that what we've seen after we reflected on what happened during the discussions is that there's a fine balance between having it totally opened or open-ended and to provide some form of structure so that the questions still and the discussions are still very much focused on what we want to achieve. So, but I think in the end, it's this fine balance that must be achieved.
And I think the other clear outcome was, I'm speaking from a UK perspective, but I think it might occur to South Africans as well, is to remove their cultural blinkers. They can only think about their own cultural community. And this opened their eyes to the world outside, basically, and remove those cultural blinkers.
I think I'd add to that as well. It made it all much more real life because of that. I think often in science and the way we teach occasionally, things can sound incredibly theoretical. I mean, in pharmacology, we talk about this a lot. How could we theoretically discover new drugs here or develop new drugs for this particular condition, things like this? And it feels like very much an academic exercise. Whereas those being very honest conversations with students, with peers, getting to share that and getting to see the more real side of all the work that we're doing, I think was incredibly beneficial and wouldn't have happened otherwise. And I do agree with all those pieces around the kind of the fun and really getting to see that was really exciting. I think we would have really missed that. Otherwise, it would have felt incredibly didactic, very theory based, instead of getting that opinions brought in.
Thank you. Anybody, we've got the last few minutes, so anybody would like to add any last comments, suggestions, ideas, anything that anyone would like to contribute?
Can I just say thank you? Thank you for the opportunity to share what we have learned with others, to share our experience with our students, and also to provide an example of how this is doable between two different universities, and really allow the students and learning to take place. Dave?
Yes, reiterate that, but also you can't get it right first time. So it's building on year by year and changing things and tweaking things. And for me, I think next year's tweak is very much selling the opportunity and the potential to students beforehand.
I was going to say very similar things, but then also, if you do want to do it, go for it. It's okay if it goes wrong the first time, you have to iterate it. It's okay if you accidentally shut breakout rooms slightly earlier than you intended to. Things will go wrong. You can reflect and learn from it, but also the students will find it such a valuable experience, even if there are those little things you want to tweak. So for anyone that does listen to this and thinks, wow, amazing, I want to have a go, my advice is just really just go for it.
Alex, just to add to what you just said, the virtual exchange, where the platform we're doing it on, the students experience it as a safer area for conversation, which I feel aids in the openness of them to discuss. Yes, and then obviously, if mistakes are made, we're all human. It still adds a bit to the calmness or the relaxedness of the discussion, rather than it being a very strict, stiff, disciplinary lecture discussion type.
Yeah, thanks, Henrika. Yeah, I think it is, and I think someone mentioned that it's fun, and I think you did, and when you make learning fun, students are more likely to retain some of that those learnings from it, and I think sometimes they make lifelong friends. through these exchanges. It helps students to open themselves up for in-person travel as well, where particularly in South Africa, many of them are anxious about traveling overseas. So I think the virtual exchange does all those sort of things. So with that, I'd like to thank you all very much indeed for coming and sharing your exciting project with us. And we look forward to seeing it in print. So thank you and goodbye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Penny.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.